On July 13, 1978, inside a secretive physics institute in Protvino, Soviet researcher Anatoli Bugorski walked toward a machine built to fire protons with world-record confidence, because the Cold War apparently believed even subatomic particles needed a security clearance. The machine was the U-70 synchrotron, a giant ring of magnets and vacuum pipes commissioned in 1967, powerful enough to make the Soviet Union briefly hold the world record for proton energy. This was not a glowing science fiction doorway or a villain's death ray. It was a practical, industrial-looking accelerator complex, the kind of place where the universe gets interrogated with cables, concrete, warning lights, and extremely serious paperwork. That day, Bugorski was checking malfunctioning equipment connected to a proton beam line, which is already the sort of sentence that should make every safety officer sit upright. According to later accounts, he had asked for the beam to be turned off, then arrived at the equipment a minute or two too early, because timing in this story had decided to become the antagonist. A door that should have protected the area was open, and a warning light that should have announced danger was not doing its one heroic job, which is a brutal performance review for a light bulb.
The beam itself was not a giant visible laser. It was a narrow stream of high-energy protons, only a few millimeters across, moving through its channel with far more confidence than any human head should ever meet. Bugorski leaned over the equipment, and for a fraction of a second, the beam passed through the back of his head, through the left side of his skull and ear region, and out near the left side of his nose. He later described seeing a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, but he felt no pain, which somehow makes the moment more frightening, because the body did not even get time to raise an objection. The local dose estimates were staggering. Thousands of gray in a pencil-thin path, while a whole-body dose of only a few gray can be fatal. In ordinary medical terms, this was not an accident. It was a physics problem wearing a human face. Bugorski understood enough to know the consequences could be severe, but instead of collapsing into panic, he finished the maintenance work, recorded notes in the log, and went home, because Soviet lab culture was apparently allergic to dramatic exits.
By the next day, the left side of his face had swollen badly, and he finally reported what had happened. He was taken to a special clinic in Moscow, where doctors expected they might be observing his final weeks. The doctors had radiation medicine, but not exactly a chapter titled, "What to Do When a Proton Accelerator Writes a Line Through Someone's Head." So Bugorski became an emergency patient and an unwilling case study at the same time. In the days after the accident, the path of the beam became visible through severe burns and tissue damage. But the strangest finding was not the injury itself. It was the fact that he was still alive. Then the impossible part kept happening. He stayed alive, kept thinking clearly, and eventually recovered enough that the story had to stop being a death watch and become a question science could not neatly answer. The best explanation is probably not miracle, but geometry. The beam was incredibly narrow, the exposure was brief, and the damage was concentrated instead of spread through his whole body.
Even then, survival did not mean he walked away untouched. He lost hearing in his left ear, developed constant ringing, and the nerves on the left side of his face were damaged until that side became partially paralyzed. He also experienced seizures and grew more easily mentally fatigued, but his memory, intelligence, and ability to work in physics remained mostly intact, which is the kind of outcome that makes doctors blink very slowly. About 18 months later, Bugorski returned to work, completed his doctorate, and continued in high-energy physics, because apparently his response to being hit by an accelerator was to stay professionally adjacent to the accelerator. For more than a decade, the accident was kept mostly out of public view, partly because Soviet nuclear and high-energy research lived behind a wall of secrecy thick enough to make concrete jealous. Twice a year,
Bugorski went to a Moscow radiation clinic for examinations, meeting other people injured by nuclear and radiation accidents. A small club nobody joins voluntarily and nobody forgets.
One of the most eerie long-term effects was visual. The paralyzed left side of his face did not wrinkle like the right side, as if time itself had hit a locked door on only half of him. That detail sounds like the opening of a superhero movie, but reality was less generous. No powers, no comic book glow, just pain, medication, seizures, and a scientist trying to keep working while bureaucracy warmed up in the corner. The U-70 itself remained part of Russian high-energy physics, a huge machine from the age when nations proved seriousness by building underground circles and asking protons to explain existence at terrifying speed. In a darker way, Bugorski's survival became a reminder that fatal dose usually describes whole-body exposure, while a narrow beam can create a different and deeply unpredictable disaster. So no, the lesson is not that particle accelerators are secretly survivable, or that anyone should test a beamline with their face. The lesson is that safety systems exist because luck is a terrible engineer. Anatoli Bugorski survived something science had every reason to call impossible. And the strangest part is not that physics nearly killed him, it is that afterward, physics still had questions only he could answer. And that is Anatoli Bugorski, a man so oddly human that after being hit by one of the most powerful machines on Earth, his next plot twist was paperwork, clinic visits, and going back to work.